Welcome into the Stack Shack podcast. My name is Nathaniel. It is great to have you with us here again today. And we have an awesome episode for all of you today. Some great content came out, and we're ready to talk about it. Both new Netflix originals. We're going to talk about The Harder They Fall, or The Harder We Fall, which is the Western. Idris Elba, kind of maybe the lead there, at least as far as the marquee is concerned. And then we've got the new League of Legends animated series, Arcane. But let's talk first about The Harder They Fall.
I just watched The Harder They Fall like 2 hours ago, so it's kind of fresh in my mind.
Wow, perfect.
I know, yeah, like great timing.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed it. There was a lot of fun moments, and I felt like a lot of the acting was really good. It just fell off for me at the end.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. My overall thoughts.
What was it about the end that made you feel like it fell off?
I didn't feel like it was it was built up to a point, and then I felt like the ending confrontation didn't like match the right level. Spoilers, obviously.
Yeah.
I did not like the ending confrontation with Buck.
With Buck.
With Rufus Buck, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It didn't feel like I needed that twist right there. I would have rather have preferred. Like, I liked the dialogue leading up to it, and I just would have preferred a more final note rather than how it ended. In my opinion, at least.
Yeah. I think I would agree with you in some regards, and in others maybe disagree. Overall, I really enjoyed it. I think it scratched a good like Western itch for me. I thought it was fun, right? A lot of it was fun. Yeah, a lot. But I would also agree. I felt like the best moments were at the beginning. Like the train hijacking scene.
The train was so smooth.
It was
perfect.
And I was just getting into it going, oh, this is what I wanted, from this show. And like even the opening scene with Buck coming into the room and kills the father and mother and carves the cross into his brain. I'm like, whoo! All right, we're getting into this.
Well, then we go straight from that to the church scene, and I was like, oh, I like the church scene.
I would agree with you.
Too.
I felt that it sort of stumbled towards the end. Now, I did actually like aspects of the of that last conversation, maybe a little more than it sounds like you did. I
liked the conversation. I just didn't like the direction the conversation took the story, I guess.
Yeah, I could see that. It did feel a little forced. It almost felt like they were like, well, we need a twist. What could we do?
Yeah.
And just kind of threw one in there. So I get that. And you're probably right in that they could have done like that same exact conversation and not had to just throw this twist in there at the end. One thing that I was actually somewhat surprised I didn't like, and I think it was the worst part of the film, at least for me, I really did not like the ending shootout.
I agree.
I felt like it had no impact. It was just kind of smoke popping out of the ends of guns, and it was really hard to follow to me.
Yes.
Like where people were coming from or what people were doing. It was just like, okay, I'm going to watch him run over here, but then he's over here. It just didn't have a cohesive feel to me.
It also felt to me...
And I think that really took me out of the film, and I think that hurt that final scene even more because... there were some good moments in there, but the actual shootout, I thought was not very well done.
I
and
agree.
and for a movie that I loved so much up until that point, that was a bit of a shock to me. Because I mean, the part where, and I'm gonna blank on his name because I didn't. It's been almost a week since I watched it, but um, you had this buildup of the kind of like who's the fastest gun in the West classic style, right?
Hmm.
And then he's counting too
Jim.
slow and gets shot, right?
Yeah.
That was great. But then after that, it just went downhill. I felt like with the shootout, it wasn't well. Um, it just didn't feel organized. I couldn't follow what was going on, and I didn't have much impact for. It was shot in such a way that I never felt like the heroes were in any danger.
Yes.
Like they're just
Yes.
kind of walking around and
It also
they
felt
just
like one of those
kind of
where the
swing
bad
their
guys
gun
couldn't
around and
hit anything.
everybody die. Um, and so that was probably the most disappointing part for me. I would agree. I felt the twist was a bit rushed, but other than that, um, it was probably that shootout for me, and that really hurt because the build up to that shootout had been so incredibly well done, in my opinion, and had so many great moments. Um,
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Um, like there are some cool shots in the final shootout to me.
yeah.
Um, like there's a moment I can't remember his name. The rifle guy. He's like
Mm,
on top of the roof
yeah.
and like
Yep.
he like ducks behind cover. The sniper's looking for him. He pops up somewhere else and shoots him. Like that was a cool scene. But
Yeah.
then it has these other guys on the roof all of a sudden start shooting at him and like why weren't you shooting at him before? Or
Also, and
um,
where were they the whole time? Like they
yeah,
weren't
like
there, and then all of a sudden they're there.
they popped
Where are
out of
these people
nowhere
coming
and
from?
they obviously had a line of sight that whole time, but now they're like, oh, now we're gonna start shooting at you. Or it also felt like okay, we saw. I mean, two characters died. The main character gets shot, so obviously people landed shots. But
Yeah.
there are so many times where it's like, oh, this guy should have dead to rights. Like so many shots where every
Yeah.
character should have been dead.
Yeah. Exactly. And it just didn't land for me because of that. It took me out of the immersion. Like I was enjoying the story, I was immersed in the story, and then I was no longer in the story.
Yep.
Um, I do want to talk. We talked some of the negatives here. Some of the positives. We already talked about that train scene, and I
Oh,
can't.
dude,
I can't
we can go over it
stress
again.
it
Let's do
enough.
it.
That scene was so well done. The dialogue, the swagger, it just felt great.
Oh, so good. I mean, that was the point where I'm like, okay, I like both of these crews now. Like we got to see
Mm-hmm.
both of them, and just I don't remember the other fast guy,
Mm-hmm.
Cherokee,
Yeah, Cherokee
whatever,
Bill.
Bill. Yeah, um, loved his character. He was so fun. That the whole train scene, how he interacted with Nat Love and everyone afterwards, enjoyed
Yes.
that.
Yes. Yeah, he was a great character. And this brings up an interesting point. So at the beginning of the film they said, this is not a true story, but all of these people really lived. And I thought that was such an interesting concept because all of these characters were real characters of the West.
Hmm.
In that time, well, not even in that time period, but over different time periods. And so they just kind of took all these like heroes of the time of that more broad era and brought them into a storyline together. They weren't all gangsters. They weren't all um, gunslingers or gang members, but they were all kind of members of that culture. And I thought that was a really interesting choice to bring people like Cherokee Bill, Stagecoach Mary. They're all real people. Um, and to kind of just reimagine the history is like, what if they were all here? And to use that the avenue of a western in order to introduce us to these characters, I really enjoyed afterwards because I was like, I wonder what they were meaning by how much of this is true and how much of it isn't. When they said they all really lived, so I really enjoyed reading up on all of these characters, um, and and all of them were very interesting,
Oh yeah.
and their backgrounds and what they meant to that era, and I think uh, to to talk also about the representation that this movie brought to what is typically a very whitewashed genre. The westerns are typically very whitewashed, at
Yes.
least in my opinion, and to bring all of these African American, in Native American kind of heroes, or men and women that really lived and were heroes of the time, um to give them a film, I think was really cool, because I feel like sometimes we or I feel like the western genre by and large has always just kind of whitewashed that part of the history, when really one of the beauties of that part of the history, and one of the beauties of the Wild West, quote unquote, is it wasn't, the South with the civil. This is after we've emancipated slaves,
Hmm.
or it's a situation like the gold rush was a total melting pot of people, right?
Oh yeah.
And the people moving west were getting away from a lot of that. Now, a lot of it comes with them, and I thought there were some funny moments. It's a white town where they just whitewashed all of the walls and made everything in it white. I thought that was
Oh,
hysterical.
I was
Um,
laughing about it because I was like, oh, they really played this up, and then they like bold letters. It's a white town.
it's a
Like they're
white
like, this is the
town.
joke.
Yeah, and it's just kind of this little tip of the cap kind of idea, little nod, and I thought that was great. So I think the movie as a whole, I would say, was good, not
Hmm.
great, but I do think it did
Yes.
certain things really well. One, the representation I thought was excellent, um, and it painted, in my opinion, a somewhat more realistic picture of the West. Um, you know, and the people that were living and the people that were shaping it. And I love that it brought attention to me. I mean, I hadn't heard of a lot of these characters before,
Hmm.
but to then go and it sparked an interest of, oh, okay, I want to read about this person and who they really were. Again, they weren't all gang members. I would encourage you to go look up. I'm not going to go over the backstories of each character, but I
We'd be
encourage you to
here a
go
while.
look it up. Yeah, I'd encourage you to go look it up and read about them, because they're very fascinating, and how they shaped the West themselves. And so I think it did those things well. I think the first, like, I would really say up until that final act, I think is just top level cinema. I thought it was fantastic. The train scene specifically stands
Oh
out
yeah.
a lot. Um, the uh the song, Stagecoach's Mary's song in the saloon,
Oh
was
yes.
another really cool scene. um I also enjoyed how they brought music into the film, in what I thought was a pretty natural way to do so, because you know music has always been integrated into our society, and I love when they um, kind of bring that in, um, to a film. And so I thought the music was well done and well integrated with what was happening on screen. Um, and then all of that, led up. Those were the things I think the film did really well. Things I think it didn't do as well. That final shootout, I don't think was well, and I do think that final. I would agree with you. That final twist did feel a bit forced. Now, the
Yeah.
dialogue around that twist I thought was fine,
Hmm.
and actually really good, and I think it brought up some interesting, you know, um, comparisons,
Yes.
and it did bring out some interesting emotions and concepts to think about and really sit with, which I think is important for a film to do. But the fact that they probably could have done that exact same thing without bringing that twist in and making it all feel forced. Um, and that's kind of where I'd leave it. I'd leave it as probably a 7 or 8 out of 10. I thought it was good,
Mm.
but not great. Probably a 7 out of 10 for
Yeah.
me.
That's where I was sitting on it, because I loved everything up until that final shootout as well. You brought up a really good point with how this western's bringing in a lot more representation instead of
Mm-hmm.
just being very whitewashed compared to a lot of them.
Yeah.
Um, I thought the soundtrack also did very much a similar thing.
Mm.
Like this was not a typical western soundtrack at
That's a
all.
good point.
Like we got a lot of the more like southern church hymn kind of feel songs in there, but we
Mm-hmm.
also had some very hip hop element songs,
And
influenced
that's,
at least.
yeah, for sure. And that's something I've noticed Netflix has a tendency to do. And I feel like this is a trend with a lot of Netflix's period dramas. They bring in music that is totally not from the era.
Yes.
Like, not even close. Like, Peaky Blinders has a bunch of grunge all throughout
Okay, I really need to get to Peaky Blinders then.
it. Right? And then this one has a bunch of hip hop elements, and I just think it's cool. I really
Yeah.
just think it's cool when it works. If you're like, and I think we even talked about this a little bit on when we reviewed Shadow and Bone, how Shadow and Bone did not do that, and they went with
No.
more of a traditional fantasy type soundtrack, and I thought that was an interesting play, and I appreciated that they did that because I felt like that fit that storyline a little better. Um, but I love when they bring in, and I'm glad you highlighted that, they had some of the more older sounding, kind of the church hymn style
Mm.
stuff, the more
Like when
um,
they
the
sang right
more
before the final
classic folk
confrontation.
music. Yeah, exactly. The more classic folk music as well. But they also like brought in all of these hip hop elements, which I just think is incredibly fun and interesting.
Hmm.
You know. So yeah, I would agree with that. The soundtrack was fantastic.
And I, depending on the story, I feel like that can really pull you out of it. Like if you're really
Yeah.
trying to go set you in this area. But
Mm-hmm.
I thought it worked really well in this movie.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
So yeah, I would go 7 out of 10. It if the middle portion of the movie, if I disliked the middle portion of the movie and the ending hit home for me, probably would have been a good 8.5. Um,
Yeah. That's a good
I
point.
just feel like you got to nail the ending. You got to land
Yeah.
it.
Well, it's a western. We need that shootout at the end. That's what you're building to the whole movie. It's got to be perfect, and
Exactly.
it fell a little short. So I think that's why we're dropping it a few points for that. If you like westerns, I think it would be a movie to go watch. If you are not a western fan, it might be a bit more of a tough sell.
But I feel like it stayed away from a lot of the Western tropes.
That's
Um,
true.
it had a lot more style than a lot of Westerns to me.
Yes, it
So
was
I feel like
hyper
even if you're not
stylized, which
a
was cool.
yeah, even if you're not a Western fan, I would say like if you like fun action movies,
Yeah.
at least until the end.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, if you're an action movie fan, um, you'll probably get a decent amount out of it. All right. Well, I think that's going to conclude our discussion of The Harder They Fall. Um, check it out. Let us know in the comments what you thought. Did you like the twist at the end? Maybe we have some different opinions out there in the comments. But that brings us into our next Netflix original, called Arcane.
Arcane.
And very different. We went from Western to animated, um,
Fantasy.
and fantasy, and kind of sci-fi, maybe even a little bit. Arcane is based off of the video game League of Legends,
Yes.
which, full disclosure, I have never played a match of League. I never have. I'm not a MOBA guy. I tried Dota. I played like 2 matches and went, nope, not for
Yep.
me. See ya later. I'm out. And so I played a couple matches of Paragon before they destroyed it. Um, and so I've never played League. Have no idea about the characters. But
Same.
reading a little bit online, um, it sounds like League has never had a very good like story. Like they've never actually fleshed out a in-depth story of these characters, and that I do know that this show is a bit of an origin story for a couple of the characters that are in the game. So really cool. Netflix, again, Netflix original, working with Riot Games. And then also the studio who's doing it, if my research is correct, the studio that did all the animations is the studio that has done a lot of League's cinematic trailers for their expansions, which I think is
Oh,
really
okay.
cool because how many times have you heard out there in the gaming community, oh man, I want a whole TV show of this trailer. You know, there's a game trailer that comes out and you're like, that is so sick. I wish there was a whole TV show. Well, congratulations, you got it here with Arcane. And so I'll start off with my thoughts. I was blown away by Arcane. I fell in love with it. The first 3 episodes are out right now. The next 3 are coming on Saturday. By the time you watch this, the next 3 might have just dropped. And then they'll release the final 3 the following week. So it's 3 separate drops of episodes. And overall, I thought these first 3 episodes were incredible. It drew me in as I'm not a fan of League. I've never played League. I just saw, well, this is kind of interesting. I saw a couple of trailers that looked okay, and I wanted to check it out. The art style, I'm. Some people are raving about it and saying it's the greatest art style they've ever seen. I'm not sure I'm totally in love with it, but it does do certain things incredibly well. Some of the establishing shots,
Mm-hmm.
some of the action sequences as well, I think are just mind-blowingly good with the art style. It's a very unique art style. I would really encourage you to
Yes.
look at it just from a unique perspective. It was one that I wasn't sure about at the beginning. As I watched more, it started to feel more natural and I really got into it. So that's my kind of overarching review. Gabe, what did you think?
I was in a very similar boat. Like I had only ever played. I never played League of Legends. My friend tried to get me into it like back when we were in middle school baseball together. Uh, and yeah, I installed it. It said, "Oh, 20 minutes to start a match." I'm like, "Yeah, let's not do that." Uh, my internet at the time was awful, so
Hmm.
didn't know anything about League. Uh, didn't look anything up until after the show. I just kind of like, okay, let's go into this not knowing anything.
Yeah, going blind.
Yes, I did. It took a very different turn than I expected it to. Uh,
Oh, interesting.
the well, like I anticipated some of the points, but the consequences for things were a lot more severe than I expected for this kind of show, which I
Mm,
was very very like, yes, please, this is great.
yeah.
Um, so I really enjoyed it. I started to fall in love with the world, like the
Oh,
concepts going on, the like the whole like, okay, this is a town where we just don't want magic, and now let's use science to harness magic. Like that's
so
love
interesting.
that concept. So cool. Like that. I'm not a lot of animated show subplots. Not my favorite. This one I loved. I loved just fleshing out the world through this subplot. If not the characters were okay, but
Hmm.
um, the main plot really enjoyed. I enjoy seeing this like, okay, we're following these characters that have set off a series of events that affect things that are much bigger than them.
Yep.
Um, and so they kind of turn into this. Well, we're gonna use you as like a scapegoat to set these series of events in motion.
Mm,
Um,
mm-hmm.
I enjoy that. I'm glad it didn't like fully revolve around them, even though they definitely had a huge impact. Uh,
Yeah.
so I enjoyed it. I'm really the episode 3 was heart wrenching at the end. Holy wow.
Yeah. It got heavy. It got heavy
Really
there.
heavy.
It
So I'm
really
really
did.
looking forward to what's happening next.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy the art style. I wouldn't say it's my favorite.
Yeah.
Like at first, it kind of feel like, I don't know. To me, it's like when you first play Borderlands. Like you're like,
Mm.
whoa, this is really different, but
That's a great analogy.
you acquire it after a while, right?
Uh-huh.
Like at first, it's like, whoa, there's some very harsh lines on these characters' features, but then you notice like, oh, like it adds so much detail that I enjoyed a lot. It's hard to describe. I just
Yeah.
really I started to enjoy it after a while.
I totally agree. It was a bit jarring at first, but
Mhm.
then after an episode or two, I was like, "Oh, I love this. This is
Yeah,
great."
you
Um,
get into it really fast.
you really do. And I like that you brought up. I mean, this really does feel to me like an adult fantasy. Now, not not adult as in X-rated, adult as in this is going to be mature. There are consequences for the actions. Main characters are going to actually be in peril. Um,
Yeah.
you compare it to something like Bad Batch, um, or Clone Wars. Clone Wars, I think, blurred that line a little bit, or quite often, and that's why I think it was so incredibly successful. But Arcane is definitely another step more mature, but without going too over the top. Like, it didn't go to Castlevania where we're
Hmm.
just gonna throw a bunch of blood and gore in here. um, it stayed, I felt like, in a sweet spot for a mature story, or a fairly mature story, um, without being too overly graphic to
Yes.
where a younger audience can't get into it.
Yeah.
Um,
Like this isn't Invincible. It's not
no,
that level.
exactly. It's not Invincible. It's not Castlevania. Um, I think it sits in a nice middle space between a Clone Wars and an Invincible kind of a
Hmm.
situation where we're not going full blood and gore and you know all that
Too
extra
much. Yeah.
stuff, but we're also definitely going to be telling a complex story with complex themes, which is something Clone Wars did really well. And I mean, Clone Wars is kind of the goat when it comes to TV shows, anyways. So it's unfair to compare it to them, but I would say it does jump to a higher degree there, as far as the mature story is concerned. And I mean, I loved it. Now I want to get your opinion on this.
Mm.
Netflix is known for their binge culture, right? They're the ones that created that. This, I'm
Yes.
gonna drop all the season. You can watch The Office for 48 hours straight. um, we're gonna drop the entire season of Stranger Things. We're gonna drop
Yep. All of The Witcher.
all of The Witcher in one day. Okay, all of Shadow and Bone in one day, and you are gonna
Hmm.
binge it if you are interested in the series. They've changed that for Arcane. It's not a one-time just drop of all the content. Um, it is in three separate 3-episode drops, and I wanted to get your opinion on that because we've been somewhat critical of Netflix's binge culture as a marketing device.
Mm.
When we've talked about uh, Disney Plus and how much we enjoy the weekly episode system of things like WandaVision, things like Mandalorian. What are your thoughts on this new kind of iteration on their binge system here that Netflix is trying out?
I'm a big fan of it so far. Actually,
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't sure how I would feel about it because 3 episodes at once. Uh, they're 40-minute episodes. That's a movie right there.
That's
Like a good
yes.
2-hour movie.
Yep.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so I wasn't sure how I was gonna feel about it, but
Mm-hmm.
afterwards, I guess it might depend on going forward how they do it. But
Yeah.
this first week, I'm enjoying
Mm-hmm.
it a lot.
Which is always
I have
wonderful.
time to sit and like contemplate those 3 episodes and think, oh, this is where it's gonna go. Like I can think about the show afterwards without having to be like, oh, I didn't like this or this, and like be done with it. Right?
Yeah.
I have more time to just, okay, I enjoyed that. I can't wait to see more.
Yeah.
Um, while not also, not, I think they're striking a good balance with Arcane in that here's 3 episodes to binge, and we're gonna give you more next time. Like it's not just a 30-minute Mandalorian episode, right?
Yeah.
So like there's still that okay, well, you can sit down for a decent amount of time
Yeah.
if you really want to.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so I think this is a good direction, at least for some of Netflix's shows.
Yeah, I think I would wholeheartedly agree with that. I really don't like the drop the whole season at once. Um because I feel like it just saps all the energy. Like, it makes for a one weekend where everybody's talking about it and then it's over.
Yeah.
Um,
And it
and I
doesn't feel like
think
you can catch up afterwards.
that is true too. Like, you better watch it on day one. Otherwise, nobody's going to be talking about it anymore. You're going to have
Yeah.
nobody talk. Well, that was months ago. I
You're
already watched all of
culturally
those.
out.
Yeah, it's you get all of the episodes, and I think you also brought up an interesting point of, and I hadn't even thought of this, but it is true. When I'm able to binge, at the end, I'm just going back and being like, well, I didn't like this or I didn't like this. I'm not really. I
I
never
feel like you're
had
more
the
critical
moments.
afterwards.
I feel like I'm more critical. Exactly. And I never have the moments that I'm getting here with Arcane where I'm like, ooh, I wonder where it's going to go. How are they going to do this? How are they going to do this? I'm interested to see how they're going to do this. I don't have these. Those are more positive thoughts of, I'm very excited to see what they're going to do with these characters or with this situation. And I wonder how this is going to end up. And I can't
Yeah.
wait to see more intense action scenes when these characters get a little older and a little more powerful, right?
Now, granted, that might just be because Arcane is that good so far. Um, but
True.
I feel like a lot of it is that we have time to, like, let's take The Witcher. When I
Mm-hmm.
watched The Witcher, I watched, I want to say, all the episodes in 2 nights.
Yeah.
2, 3. What I don't remember.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if it was a weekly thing, that those episodes that I really didn't like wouldn't have stuck with me quite as much because I
Mm.
wasn't like I could say like, okay, this week's episode wasn't that good, and move on
Yeah.
to next week.
Move on to next week.
I feel like they were spaced out enough where, like, my least favorite episodes of The Witcher are far enough apart, and like there's more enough episodes in between where it would have left that bad taste would have been out of my mouth for a longer period of time,
Mm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, so like I feel if it was spaced out more, I would have had more positive things to say about it because I had more time to sit with the things I liked rather than reflect on, oh, this part was bad, and so I'm moving from a bad episode straight into an episode that now I'm going to see as mediocre.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, and the other thing is, um, there's a level of when it's a week to week, I feel like, and I would even, let's go Mandalorian season 1. There were a couple episodes there, I think it's like 3 and 4, that were just, I was
They
starting to
weren't the
go
best.
like, okay, we need to get going somewhere.
Yeah.
We're kind of just sitting here, not doing much. And then Dave Filoni, in classic Dave Filoni fashion, wraps it all up and makes it crazy at the end. But um, when I tell people about Mandalorian, it's like, oh well, yeah, episode 3 is not great, but it's still decent. You should watch it still.
Yeah.
Whereas with Witcher, I'm like, well, I don't remember what episodes they were, but there were some just not very good parts in there. Um,
Yes.
if you really like fantasy, just kind of get through that because it feels like one cohesive piece rather than separate episodes.
Hmm.
And so I can't compartmentalize and be like, well, yeah, episode 3 is just not the best, but the rest of it's great. And I think that's something that the weekly release schedule allows for fans to kind of compartmentalize some of those maybe mediocre or less than excellent episodes are. I think this 3-episode mode of Netflix is the perfect iteration of what of between the two, because I know one of the things that makes Netflix unique is that binge style, right?
Yeah.
We get
People
very
come back for it.
excited. People, are like, all right, this weekend, Stranger Things is coming out. I'm just going to watch Stranger Things all weekend. Like, we get excited for the binge. When Shadow and Bone came out, I was like, I know exactly what I'm doing Friday night. Watch it, all
Exactly.
the episodes. Here we go. Um, and so I think that's a unique thing that Netflix does that sets them apart from all the other streaming services, all the other TV show um, production companies. Netflix, it sets them apart. But by doing the 3 episodes, I think they're able to still set themselves apart in that you do feel still like it's almost a binge. Now,
Hmm.
these episodes are, 40 minutes long, so it does turn out to be about a movie, so it's maybe not feeling totally a binge. But if those were hour episodes, you'd start to feel like it was a binge here.
Oh yeah.
I'm sitting here for 3+ hours with a bathroom break, or going to get some food or whatever that is. And yet they are also still spreading it out in 3 weeks. And so I would imagine, and from what I've seen on Twitter, this has been true so far, the discussion of Arcane is continuing.
Oh yeah.
All week I've been seeing stuff about it. And you know what? I bet you when they drop on Saturday, there's going to be a whole new spark of new conversation about it. And from just a pure marketing monetization, it's better for Netflix or for these shows. It's better for Riot Games and League of Legends to have people talking about their TV show for longer. You want to take up the public eye for a period of time. That's why Game of Thrones just smashed, because that's all people talked about when a new season was coming out. Every week, everybody was talking about the new episodes. And you can build a more broad fan base, and I can be like, hey, this Saturday, I'm going to watch all the episodes, right? And if I love them, I'm going to talk about it, and I'm going to tell my friends, and they're going to be like, oh, cool, let me catch up so that I can watch them next Saturday with you, right? The release. So I can be a part about that new drop. When you drop them all at once, I felt this way with The Witcher. I didn't watch it on release. I had other things going on, so I didn't see it on release. And then by the time I was like, oh, I should probably get back to The Witcher, but there just wasn't any excitement around it. Nobody was talking about it anymore. The discussions were already done. It's been out of the public eye. It wasn't part of the current pop culture. And so it was like, okay, I wanted to watch it because I was interested in the show, and so I did. But there was no incentive to get me into the fandom. Yes. I felt like I missed the fandom.
It could have just as easily gone on the back burner of your backlog of shows to watch.
Exactly. It could go along with shows like Breaking Bad that started to come out before I was old enough to watch them, and I just I'll get to it eventually. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yep. Which I will get to Breaking Bad eventually. I need to, but we
can do a weekly episode thing on that together.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. We could do it a part of the podcast. But I think with Arcane, it gives them still unique in that there's 3 episodes and a lot of content is dropping. And that's something I would say frustrates me about Disney Plus sometimes is, yes, it's great that they don't have hard time limits on their episodes and they're allowed to have some flexibility to come to more natural endings. But sometimes that natural ending is 34 minutes. I'm like, I waited a week to watch 34 minutes.
Yeah,
what am I doing?
You could have fleshed it out just a little more to make me feel better.
I don't feel like I got my Mandalorian fix this week. I need more. And so Arcane, I think, was like, yo, you got 3 episodes. This is plenty of content. You're going to be satisfied. Okay, I sat here and watched Arcane for a while.
Yes.
I feel like I got a lot of content out of it. And so I think it's a great natural progression. I really hope that it does as well as I'm thinking. I think it does better for marketing.
The hype level is up right now.
Right. I hope it continues. I hope this does actually affect Netflix's numbers and they see wow, this show did really well because we released it this way. I hope that turns out to be true. That's my intuition. Because I'd love to see The Witcher follow this pattern.
Yes.
Drop 3 episodes at a time. Do it. Or 2, because Witcher's longer. But go ahead.
This method makes it more approachable for people who aren't into the show. I hadn't heard of Arcane for a while until you mentioned hey, let's watch this. Okay. It was a lot more approachable to me to be 3 episodes. Okay, if I don't 3 episodes is enough for me to okay, if I like or dislike, I don't have to do it. I can set aside enough time for 3 episodes, even if I dislike the show, right?
That's true.
It's time for me to sit down okay, I'll try it out.
And then you're caught up and able to discuss it if you don't like it. right? You
Yeah.
didn't have to sit through 8 episodes just to get to the end and go, yeah, I didn't really like that.
Yeah. Well,
To,
then it's different than like if they had dropped all 9 at once. I would have been more put off. Like that's a lot of episodes to watch.
yeah,
Um, but also this whole like from what it released Friday, right?
yeah,
I want to say.
Friday at midnight, I think it was, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't watch it Friday night. I'm most Netflix shows I'm assuming it would stay for like about a week, but I had this whole week to get caught back up or to watch it myself if I wanted to. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it felt more approachable. Like, hey, I watched these 3 episodes. I could go tell someone else, be like, you need to watch this, and they can catch up before the next episodes come out, and then we can
Exactly.
be just as excited for those next 3 episodes together.
Yep, exactly. You can build a fandom. You don't
Yeah.
have half the fandom just getting passed by. I also think for me, I'm coming in, I'm not sure if I'm going to like it, but I know it's going to probably get discussed, and I'd like to
Mm.
be able to discuss it with my friends, right? I'd like to be able to talk about the show and my experience with the show. 3 episodes is so much more approachable for me to jump in and be caught up
Yes.
with everybody else. I just sit down. It's like watching a movie. A couple hours later, I'm caught up with everybody else.
Yeah.
And I can participate in those online discussions. I can participate in discussions with my friends without them being like, oh, dude, Witcher dropped. We should talk about it. And I'm like, okay, how
10
many
hours of
episodes do I
content.
got to watch? Well, you got 12 hours to go. Oh, gosh. I don't have time.
There's a whole weekend gone.
There goes my weekend just to be able to talk with my friends about a show. Like, oof, that's a tough sell sometimes. And Arcane allows me to just get right into it. And like you said,
Mm-hmm.
you could suggest it to a friend. They could watch it this week before the next episodes come out and be just as excited. And then you build a fandom in that way. So I'm really interested. I would love to see The Witcher follow this release schedule.
I feel like Arcane's the way they set the story up, like it may have been written for this style of 3 blocks a week, like 3 episodes a week. I don't know how much it would change to be like, okay, we have to have, like, obviously if you release every episode at once, like you're already setting them up as individual episodes. So like I feel like those could be easily self-contained stories. But like with The Witcher, maybe not The Witcher because that's less of a straightforward story. Let's say The Mandalorian.
Okay, yeah.
Or like season 2 specifically.
Okay.
If I was to cut that off in a 3 blocks, like 3 episodes each, right? I don't know where I would have wanted to set, like, to have plot points end. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Like it would change how you write it, and I feel like how Arcane has it, where it's, I'm pretty positive there's going to be a time jump here.
Yeah, there's going to be one. Yeah.
I feel like it lended itself to that, but who knows? Maybe it just could work with other ones. We haven't seen it try it as often.
Yeah, that's a good point. The nature of the story, if you're doing it in 3 episode blocks, then you're going to have to kind of write it in 3 episode blocks. And how that changes, I don't know. I mean, Arcane seems to be doing it really well, but you're right. It might not fit a different storyline as well. So that'll be interesting to see. I'm really interested to see if we get more shows coming out from Netflix in this fashion. I get the feeling this was a test drive to see how this would work, like new episodes weekly. How does that work on Netflix?
Yeah.
I think it's going well so far, so we'll see if it applies to some other shows.
Can we also say, so we talked about how good the Harder They Fall soundtrack. Arcane's soundtrack, full of bangers, I have to say.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
That's true.
Like, Imagine Dragons isn't my favorite band, but the opening,
no, but the
great.
opening is epic. That title sequence with the credits is just
so good.
So cool.
Also, there was one specific, I can't remember, I think it was episode 2. One of the episodes, there is a song plays as stuff like, it was the, not episode 2. When they are coming back from episode 1 and they start the brawl.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I think that's the part that has the music. Like, every time, like, music's featured in the show, or like when they first come into Undertown or whatever they call it, I can't remember.
Yeah.
That, like, thank you. These are perfect songs for these moments, in my opinion.
Yep.
Gotta say.
Yep.
But anyway, continuing.
Yeah, there are epic moments all around. And I really think that episode 3 is just, I mean, you called it gut wrenching. It really, it's
It
heavy
was
stuff.
sad.
And there are some moments like when he picks up the brass knuckles and is walking
Oh,
forward. It's
dude.
like, oh, hell yeah, that is
I mean,
metal AF.
we saw
I am in
Vi
love with
like
that.
kick ass.
And so, yeah, I could not recommend Arcane enough. So far for me, it's a 10 out of 10.
I'll probably have to put it up there as well. Yeah.
Obviously, there's 6 more episodes coming, so that rating may change. Maybe they just had a great first act, but for right now, 10 out of 10. Go watch it. I can't wait for Saturday. I've been like watching the trailers over and over again, trying to get excited for even like trying to scratch the Arcane itch until Saturday. And we'll be talking about it again next week. So with that, we're going to bring this episode to a close. Thank you for joining us. As always, if you liked the podcast, let us know in the comments. If you had some thoughts on either of the 2 pieces of content we talked about today, leave them down below. You can find us on Twitter at DC Talk, Gabe's at StellarsJ. Come hang out, come discuss.
Please send us your Arcane thoughts.
Yeah, I'll be posting my Arcane thoughts as I watch the episodes on Saturday. So, you'll get a little preview of what we'll end up talking about that week on the podcast. But with that, we're going to say good night, and we'll see you next week.